Do you want a tool that can help you get the perfect build set up every time? Aren't you curious which of these many sigils and runes is the best for you? Have you always dreamed of being able to tailor your build to exactly what you need? Well, you're in luck. Today, we're covering one of the most overpowered Guild Wars 2 tools around, the Discretize Gear Optimizer. Welcome back everyone. I've mentioned it in my last few videos, and today we're finally delving into the detail about the Gear Optimizer. This is basically a tool which will let you compare different gear, runes, sigils, and food to see which is going to be the best choice for your specific build. It takes so much of the mystery away from selecting your ideal gear and food, and makes theory crafting your own builds infinitely easier. Right off the bat, I'm not affiliated with Discretize and I didn't develop this tool. I just use it all the time and think it's one of the best tools you, as a discerning Guild Wars 2 connoisseur, can use. So let's delve in and master this tool together. First up, we'll need to select our game mode. We can choose between fractals, raids, and world versus world. The main difference between the fractals mode and the others is that the fractal mode will consider the various fractal potions and your total agony resistance. These give you extra stats and ideally will give you a different gear loadout from the other areas of the game. If you're really into fractals and want to have some specific fractal builds, then feel free to select this option. Just remember that the builds you optimize specifically for fractals might not be the best choice for other areas of the game, due to you missing stats from the fractal potions. For most players though, the raid option will be the best choice. Select your class and build from the list of classes at the top of the page. Most of the current meta builds should be included here. If for some reason your build isn't here, select one that is closest to what you need and we can customize it later on. For this video, I'm going to be looking at the Power Quickness Herald build we have lined up for our next build guide. For the skills section, depending on what class and builds you pick, there will be different skills and passive buffs, usually from signets, included and checked here. Here we can see the tool has given us Burst of Strength, which gives us increased damage for 10 seconds after we use it. It's also assumed this buff is active 87.7% of the time. Let's just leave this as is for now. It's also listed Vengeful Hammers, which is the upkeep skill when we're in Jalis stance. This skill reduces our incoming physical and condi damage, which isn't overly important today. So for now, let's just leave this unchecked. Take a quick look at these, see if they make sense for your build, and move on. And if you just started out using this tool, there generally shouldn't be any need for you to change these. In this next section, you can start choosing what runes, sigils, and food items we want to compare. Depending on what build you choose at the beginning, there will be different options already included for you. You can either remove some of these options or add new ones if you please. One very important thing to remember for this tool is that it will go through and compare every combination of runes, sigils, food, and gear you include. If you add too many of these, it is going to take a hideously long time for the tool to complete, so try and only select things that are relevant to your build. While this tool doesn't include every relevant item in the game, it does include basically all relevant ones you're going to come across. So no need to worry about all those super obscure runes that nobody uses. For our Sigil 1, we already have Sigil of Force included. Perfect. For Sigil 2, we now have some options to choose from. We have Sigil of Air, Accuracy, Impact, and Concentration. The tool will go through and compare each of these sigils to find out which is the best in our case. For runes, let's just leave it at Scholar. For now, let's leave our food and utility slots as they are. If you like, you can remove the Ascended food options and replace them with their regular version. In this case, a sweet and spicy butternut squash. This will result in your build having slightly lower damage due to the lack of lifesteal on crit. The buffs and boons section should automatically be filled with the realistic boons and buffs that you need. Note that this section does include the specific Jade Bolt tier as well, so remember to check if your build benefits from having extra vitality. In the Infusions section, we can specify what type of infusions we want to include in our build if we really want to min-max. There are also some options on the left-hand side for some common pairings. For now, we'll just leave this blank and we'll come back to it later. In the stat options section, we can choose what kind of gear stats we want to compare. These should be pre-populated depending on your starting build choice. In this case, we have Berserker, Assassin, and Diviner, which seems reasonable. If we wanted, we could also go through and include Dragon's gear if we wanted to compare it. Just remember, adding in too many stat types here will really slow down the tool, so don't be a goofy goober here. We'll come back to the section after to play with some of the rarity controls, which can be surprisingly useful. The Force slot section is very useful, especially if you don't have access to legendary gear yet. Here I could specify what gear I already have and don't want to change. For example, I could tell the tool that I want to keep all my existing Berserker's trinkets and just let it change the remaining slots. Once again, we shall return. In the priority section, we have a whole bunch of constraints to tell the tool to work with. We can tell it to optimize for damage, survivability, or healing. In this, and most cases, we'll just optimize for damage. We can tell it what type of weapon we are using, either dual wielding or two-handed. In this case, I'm just going to leave it at dual wielding. We can also tell it to give us a minimum level of health, maximum level of toughness, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Here though, we can already see that it's specified a minimum level of quickness, this being 30%. In my case, I want to hit a slightly higher boon duration of 40% just to give me a bit of extra buffer for my quickness. And with that, we're ready to calculate. Go ahead and press the button and watch your results come in. The tool has gone through and checked every combination of gear we threw at it and has spat out what the highest damage version is going to be. There's a handy little star button next to each one of our results for us to save later. Let's just go through and save our number one option for later. Scrolling down, we can see the specific gear and the final stats for our character in a much more user-friendly way. There's also a share button where you can specify what kind of weapons and skills you are using. It will then spit out this lovely summary page, which you can send to your friends, family, and co-workers. Now that's more or less the basics of the tool covered. You're now ready to go forth and make countless versions of your very own builds. For now though, let's have a little bit more of a play. By default, this tool will use ascended gear in every slot. But what if we don't have ascended gear, like me on my alt account? Let's go back to the stat options area, click on the show rarity controls option, and click this little box, so that every slot will use exotic gear instead of ascended. You can also specify this for individual slots if you wanted. Let's recalculate. We'll quickly save our number one result. Here we can see that we have a build that still gets us to 40% boon duration, but uses a different combination of gear stats, as well as a sigil of accuracy instead of air. If you want to see what the best infusions for this build are, let's switch back to ascended gear and click one of the options to add in infusions. Here, I'll take a look at some power and precision infusions, very common for power damage builds. Click calculate, save our result, and then we'll compare. If we click the show infusions button, we can see that our build uses 12 mighty infusions and 6 precise infusions. This is very good if you want to min-max like a cashed up DPS goblin. We can also force it to use only Berserker's trinkets. So let's go back to the 4 slots option and tell it to only use Berserker's gear for each of these slots. Here we can see that our Berserker's trinkets only version is only 57 damage behind our last fully optimized version with infusions. We even use the same number of infusions as before. All in all, not a bad option. Before we go, I'll quickly touch on the expert option. Go to the gear icon at the top right of the screen and toggle on the expert option. Here, we just have some more options to tinker with that were running behind the scenes before. In the trait section, we can see the specific traits for our build. If your version of a particular build has different traits, just go ahead and make your changes here. You also have specific uptimes for each trait as well. You can usually leave these at their default values. Very smart people have very carefully selected these so you don't have to. We can also now see the skill coefficient section. These values have all been pre-populated by very experienced members of the community. Why, thank you, Umbra. I won't go into detail here, but these coefficients basically represent the combination of your damaging skills and the effects used by your character in its rotation. Think of them like proportions showing where your damage comes from. For 99% of you, and me, just leave these as they are. Lastly, we can also now see the target settings area. This lets us customize how much a boss moves, which impacts torment damage, and how often they attack, which impacts how much confusion damage they take. If you want to get an idea of how well your build performs on specific raid bosses, feel free to move the sliders as you see fit. If you just want to know about golem damage, however, just leave the slider down at golem. And with that, you can now tinker with different builds to your heart's content and fully customize them to suit exactly what you need. I use this tool every few days, and me, being the massive nerd that I am, love messing with all these different build combinations. I even used this the other day to gear up a Condi Virtuoso on my alt account in full exotic gear, which ended up looking very different to the version we talked about in our last guide. I also used this just the other day to fine-tune the Power Quickness Herald build we'll be covering in our next video. So go forth, tinker away, and if you have any questions, ask away down in the comment section below. Our Discord is also linked down in the description if you want to nerd out with me about just how cool this tool is. Thank you all, and I'll catch you all next time.